Cenk, the last time you were on the ballot, you got 4% of the vote. So for you,
so what? What does that have to do with anything that we're talking about right now?
Okay, Matt, if we're going in that direction, listen, you had sex with a 17-year-old, according to allegations, and you asked for a pardon.
Oh, there we go.
There we
go. Of course. I mean, I'm going to just leave my own having worked at TYT psychoanalysis analysis out of how it took mentioning Cenk's failed campaign to get the tough question out of him. I'm just going to leave what you just saw live and not include any of my analysis at this point on. But sure. At the risk of triggering myself, let's watch some of the TYT coverage. Remember, this is my old job, so I'm kind of just like, okay. Oh, there we go. Got some Matt Gaetz here. So let's see how this went.
Right now, Representative Matt Gaetz is winning by 21, although the race has not been called yet. And Matt Gaetz joins us now. Welcome, Matt.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cenk. I think ABC News and CNN have both called my race. Couldn't have been too easy for them, but sure glad to see the voters come out for me.
All right. So, Representative Gaetz, if the Republicans win the House tonight, what is your strategy going forward? What will you emphasize in the next term?
I think it's all the I's. I think it's inflation, immigration, and investigations. And we have a mandate now to try to limit spending. I think also people are very concerned about what's happening on the border. And when it comes to the weaponization of this government against our people, folks want to see the FBI, the Department of Justice, called to heel and called to account. That used to be something that liberals actually stood for, civil liberties and stopping the excesses of the politicization of investigations. And now the Republicans that will be leading the House Judiciary Committee will have that as our central focus.
So inflation being high, you mentioned it first. Obviously, wages is...
I mean, I just want to... The first part about that was... I mean, there's a lot there. It's like... inflation, immigration, investigations, I think, was like 3 I's. And so, like... Inflation is what voters want to hear, so at least that's like a positive thing. I think we've talked about in chat, Democrats should talk about these economic issues more. Yeah, it was Adam Risch on YouTube who said it would be easier, but they talked about the raising the minimum wage. Yeah, absolutely. Force the Republicans to say, no, we want you to make less during inflation. It's like they should have these moments, these fights at the right time. If they really want to make political progress, I think. But yeah, then he's going towards immigration, which is just a fear-mongering, scare-mongering tactic. Ron DeSantis flew migrants to Martha's Vineyard in New York City. They were welcomed with open arms. It was a disgusting political ploy and tactic. It was a human rights violation, and it was a political ploy that ultimately didn't work. Like, Democratic cities are not being overwhelmed by this. It's not it's not contributing to crime. What's contributing to crime are economic conditions that Matt Gaetz doesn't seriously want to address, but at least he's paying it more lip service than a lot of Democrats are. Sorry, I'll say one thing in chat. Philippe Auguste says immigration fights inflation, which is a thing I'll respond to in a moment. I don't think I agree with necessarily, but what were some broader things you were thinking about when it came towards like where Matt Gaetz is starting to come from here with giving the tell of what the Republican Party will do under his watch?
I'm just a bit frustrated that it's like, why are you bringing him on to talk policy when you know he's just going to lie? Like, it's just, why be this nice to him already? Like, I'm open to the idea of platforming people like him, but to talk to him like he's a serious player, that he's going to mean anything he says on, like, I just, again, it's the lying, it's the complete lying that they do, the hatefulness in them, that we know what Matt Gaetz really thinks when it comes to these sorts of things.
Yeah, I hope you get a little bit more. This is the beginning of the interview, so hopefully it gets a little bit more adversarial after this. But
I hope so, because Anna kind of looks like she's ready to rip him to pieces.
Let's see what happens here.
She has that look on her face like, I'm just not going to have it.
Very large issue. So do you think that we should raise the minimum wage so that the American people's salaries can keep up with the rising cost of of all the goods that they're having to deal with?
Stronger question.
So the time when we saw rising wages was really during the Trump presidency. I don't believe that government-mandated minimum wages are actually the way to increase real wages. Actually, a lot of economists say that raising the minimum wage can be inflationary. Our strategy to tackle inflation will focus on cutting government spending, not having a regime that pays people not to work. I think able-bodied childless adults should be subject to work requirements. Previously, when Republican states have tried to do that, Democrat administrations haven't allowed them to, haven't issued appropriate waivers. And so if we can legislate work requirements into government funding bills, I think that'll be a good counter pressure on inflation.
All right, so raising wages, not what you're planning to do to counter inflation. Got it. Anna.
No, we raise wages. I just don't think the way to raise wages is a government-mandated minimum wage increase.
So how would wages increase out of the kindness of corporations' hearts who have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and keep doing corporate stock buybacks and dividends for their shareholders?
No fan of big corporations. I think the biggest threat to our liberty is big government. The second biggest threat, big corporations. And probably the third would be homeowners associations. But I do think that during the Trump era, we saw wages rise as a consequence
If anything,
of capital investment.
Matt Gaetz won a little bit of a vote with Anna there because Anna hates homeowners associations. I wonder if Matt Gaetz did homework or something. But yeah, what was it? Letterhack says, I found this unwatchable. And so far, like, yeah, Anna asked a decent question there, but it's like, okay, well, we have a history of Matt Gaetz trying to do these things during the Trump administration and not during the Trump administration. And so far, like, we know that you're not about these things. We know that you're mostly about giving taxes to the rich. So why are we like 2.5 minutes in this interview and like not talking about that aspect that Matt Gaetz already has a record about these things is definitely disappointing.
And the onshoring of cash that was largely pushed offshore to preserve intellectual property assets and revenue streams. And if we allowed more of that capital to come back into our country again, I think we would do a lot to see the investment in the workforce. Look, if you go around any district, Republican or Democrat right now, the #1 issue for a lot of small businesses is just how to get people to show up to work. And when you have a government that pays able-bodied people not to work, it really cuts against the ambitions and interests and dreams of a lot of the small businesses that are the backbone of our country.
Now, they better, like, go against this whole, oh, people don't want to work narrative. But I don't just want to hear that. I want to actually go on the offense of, like, why is the Republican Party constantly creating the conditions where, never mind, like, small business owners who, like, this is always, like, the scapegoats that's being thrown here. But a lot of what you're seeing are regular-sized restaurants and regular-sized organizations who are having issues paying people because people need to, like, make more money. People need to make more. And you can talk about all these, like, bullshit. Oh, we don't want to raise minimum wage because that would be too easy. We want to cut government spending. But, like, wait, government spending has nothing to do with the costs of food. It has nothing to do with the costs of any of these other things that, quite frankly, Congress can't do much of except for socialist-style price subsidies and, you know, supply requirements, right? So Matt Gaetz is not saying anything here. These are things that I, as a producer, can articulate on a show right now, 2 beers in. So hopefully Cenk or Anna can ask a question along these lines.
Yeah.
Okay, can you please be specific about what you're referring to when you say a government that pays people not to work? And be specific in regard to numbers. How much money are Americans allegedly getting paid by the government to sit home and not work?
Well, during the pandemic era, people got checks. And
when there were shutdowns, when companies were shut down, yes.
All of that was inflationary. And I also think that when you provide government benefits to able-bodied childless adults, like Medicaid, like childcare, like transportation, like cell phones, then you create in the economy a bubble. And when that bubble bursts, a lot of working class people, folks that...
Notice how most other countries have, you know, like Medicaid, you know, systems that cover healthcare for people. And
I know.
Their economics, like their healthcare systems that they've had for years, isn't creating just like constant bubbles. All the bubbles that tend to happen seem to be created by rapid financialization in the American economy. But again, that's just been me paying attention to politics and economics the past 20 years.
liberals actually used to stand up for, those folks get crushed and hammered when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas station. I also think Republicans are going to have a pretty big energy bill. Now, I'm not a drill everywhere, drill anywhere kind of guy. I think we've got to be smart and strategic, but certainly we want to see the Keystone Pipeline reopened. We want to see more of the fracking and shale development in the interior of the country. And I think that just reducing energy prices will do a great deal to lower inflation, because you see those energy prices baked in at every layer of the supply chain.
Well, I think it's a common myth that's repeated over and over again by both the press and the Republican Party. We are the top oil and gas producer in the world. We're also the top exporter of oil and gas, because our natural resources are completely owned by private corporations who get to sell those natural resources to the highest bidder. So if you're actually genuinely concerned about keeping gas prices low at the pump, we could nationalize our oil and gas. Would you be willing to do that?
No, I don't know that the Venezuela.
I'm going to speed ahead a little bit in this because, like, it's just
voting for.
Okay, so you want to allow corporations to export oil and gas, the highest bidders internationally.
I think we should repeal the Jones Act, because you're right, there is production that's up. As a consequence of the Jones Act, we're not able to actually get that energy to the places that we need it, so that there's broad distribution and lower prices. So actually, there's a deregulation answer that I think would unlock lower prices for the American people, given what we currently produce.
I wanted to just quickly, Cenk, one follow-up, and then I'll let you take over. The point that you made about social services like Medicaid, which provides health care to literally the most impoverished people in the country, how exactly...
I am really upset that you didn't mention the obvious point, Anna, that, like, Bernie Sanders posted this comment, like, about a month ago, that oil prices are the same price as they were per barrel in 2012. You know, adjusted for inflation or not, like, that's the same amount of price, more or less. Gas prices are double. You know, a lot of that, sure, there's supply chain issues. It's a different snapshot right now. But if so, those supply chain issues would be reflected more accurately in the price. When you're not seeing that reflected in the price of oil, what you're then led to believe is that it's corporate price gouging. What you're led to believe that a lot of the inflation going on is not like what Matt Gaetz is saying in the form of checks and all these different things. It's in the form of socialism for corporations and corporate welfare.
Well, I also hate how he's like, oh, the checks that people got. What checks? There was, what, 2?
Right.
Like, how is anybody living off of that?
And his response to this is, I'm now like, I was a little bit more, I guess, willing to give leeway to the idea of having Matt Gaetz on, but he is spewing more lies than people on, like, Cenk and Anna are able to combat effectively, which is certainly a disappointing thing here. And, like, there's a lot hectic going on, like, they're producing a show, there's, like, all this coverage and whatnot, but it's really easy. Just, like, put Matt Gaetz in the offense for, okay, why are companies hoarding prices when the cost of, like, the price for a barrel of oil is about the same as it was in 2012? Like, why is there that difference there? Why are Republicans not messaging that more to their voters and, you know, going, like, messaging from that angle? Like, that would put Matt Gaetz and force him to say some things that you'd be able to very easily use against him later. But it's just not happening here. I'll watch a few more minutes of this, but I'm already kind of, like, bored / I'm not sure if there's anything here that's going to, like, turn out great.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you guys keep on complaining about gas prices. They're higher in Canada.
Oh, yeah, it's high everywhere, as the thing is, too. It's like the politicians believe that, oh, the president can actually do something about it. No.
He didn't affect our gas prices.
Hey, Biden, fix the Mexican gas prices, too, please.
Are still able to get childcare, healthcare, not as a consequence of being poor or sick or infirm or elderly, but just because of the medical.
Let's have the full sentence. Hold on.
I am one of the people on Thomas.
Private equity firms buying up entire neighborhoods to dividend and giving it to how the Federal Reserve engaging in quantitative easing, literally printing money and giving it to banks and corporations who then turned around and invested in their own stocks and did dividends and all that. That definitely led to asset bubbles. Private equity firms buying up entire neighborhoods of single-family homes based on the money that was given to them by the Federal Reserve. That led to inflation in the housing market. I want you to explain exactly how Medicaid leads to inflation?
Well, first of all, I agree with you regarding those corporate excesses. I am one of the people on Thomas Massey's bill to audit the Fed for the very reasons you laid out. I think the Fed has become a distribution system for corporate welfare, and that cuts against working class Americans. But when you have people who aren't working, but who are still able to get child care, health care, not as a consequence of being poor or sick or infirm or elderly, but just because of the Medicaid expansion that was ushered in through Obamacare, I think that is inflationary because then people don't have to go out and spend cash and have a real economic exchange for the services that they're receiving, often as a result of government largesse.
So what I've heard so far is that giving people child care, health care, and higher wages is leading to inflation, and you guys are going to try to tackle inflation so that what I'm hearing from you is lower wages, less child care, less health care. That sounds perfectly Republican.
Cenk, it's not just the government that can do these things. There are private sector solutions as well. If people make more money, if the economy is growing at a faster rate, like it did under President Trump, then I do think we would be able to achieve those objectives. But government spending is inflationary. That is the central covenant of this election that we're going through that Republicans are very likely to win across the country. People want to see less government spending. Now, I don't think we ought to cut government spending for disabled people.
They haven't been talking about government. I want to skip to Cenk's. I'm not going to start skipping between Matt Gaetz' answers because we kind of know what's saying. I think what we're more interested in seeing is like, what is Cenk and Anna going to say?
It's continuing to drive prices up. There's exit polling showing that 83% of the voters wanted the government to do something about that. Instead, they have let those corporations gouge us over and over again as Republicans protected them. But to be fair, so did Biden. So now I want to move on to one of the things that we're most concerned about, which is democracy.
Hold on. I crossed the aisle and joined with Democrat David Cicilline to actually utilize antitrust tools to go after the very type of corporate greed that you're talking about. I'm actually hoping to persuade more people in this incoming Republican majority. The way to govern is not to just give the lobby corps the power. I'm the only Republican in Congress who doesn't take any money from any lobbyists or any PACs, full stop. And so I actually think there could be common ground with Democrats. I actually think we could
like the corporate
curb that corporate greed.
So look, we're a fair show. So it's obvious that we disagree with people on the left that don't take the corporate PAC money.
Take any PAC money, not just corporate PAC money, no ideological PAC money, no leadership PAC money.
So you're going to have him on your network and go like, yeah, Cenk, I'm for money in politics too. I'm just a fascist. I am now on the side of why did you bring him on? This is kind of annoying the shit out of me.
Isn't he under investigation right now for some very troubling things?
Yeah, that's a great thing to ask about. Let's see.
Why can't you say something about that?
Lose, not because people don't like democracy, but because people believe that Joe Biden and Democrats are engaging in threat construction around democracy as a substitute for an economic plan, for something that will actually result in people making more money, growing their businesses. So I don't think that continuing to obsess about this is going to be politically helpful for Democrats. And by the way, I don't think democracy's in any jeopardy.
And like, you know, she's going to push back on that, but like this seemed like, yeah, I don't see a lot of great use other than, hey, look, we have Matt Gaetz as a person here.
I can tell by your questions you guys still have no message, because instead of talking about how we're going to actually move the country forward, you guys are still obsessed about the 2020
election. No, Matt, I'm not a regular Democrat. I don't care about their messaging. What I care about is if your friend Donald Trump wins in 2024, we might never have another election because he's an obvious pathological liar, doesn't believe in democracy, didn't want to leave even though he lost the election, and you know it.
Cenk, the last time you were on the ballot, you got 4% of the vote. So for you,
so what? What does that have to do with anything that we're talking about right now?
Okay, Matt, if we're going in that direction, listen, you had sex with a 17-year-old, according to allegations, and you asked for a pardon.
Oh, there we go.
There we
go. Of course. I mean, I'm going to just leave my own having worked at TYT psychoanalysis out of how it took mentioning Cenk's failed campaign to get the tough question out of him. I'm just going to leave what you just saw live and not include any of my analysis at this point on. But sure.
Hold on. You asked for a pardon. You asked for a pardon. Why did you ask for the pardon?
Yeah, why did you ask Trump for a pardon if you didn't break any laws?
I've been overwhelmingly re-elected. You guys are in some sort of weird struggle session there, and I'm just glad, even though the internet hated you having me on, Cenk, you're getting to see what a congressional victory party looks like, and that's something that might be a novel experience.
Why did you ask for a pardon for having sex with a 17-year-old?
Something that even happened. You're like reading into an anonymous internet conspiracy, and it's really sad because in my district, the voters saw through that. In my state, we're overwhelmed.
Did you ask for the pardon?
That has all been debunked. I've addressed it. President Trump has addressed it. And by the way, you should look at your own comments about.
Okay, so like, Cenk fell for the deflection, which again I'm gonna keep some of my commentary out of. But the whole point you were asking him about was about election integrity, and is like, is it an insane thing to be worrying about that kind of thing? Matt Gaetz is saying there's nothing to worry about. That's a ridiculous premise. Now this has turned into a back and forth where like Matt Gaetz had his prepared comments about his congressional run, Cenk had his prepared defensive comments about his congressional run, and this is just a egotistical jerk-off fest. Which is why I'm going to be now switching to election results, because that's not
like, just even letting Matt Gaetz say it's like, oh, you guys are the conspiracy theorists, without just
Sandy, you've been on for quite a long time. I think I'm gonna have Caesar or Bam or Sean join in just a moment, but any last words, any like parting thoughts or comments for us while we have you here? Any wishes for maybe the American democracy? How about this? That's a good question. What do you hope? What do you want the American left to think about after this election, considering some elections that Canada's had recently, where they've had to sort of just accept how they sort of had to accept that the left is unable to kind of come to their rescue, and the only people who are kind of working kind of on their side are inept liberals who are fairly conservative in their own right. What do you have to say to an American left who probably hasn't like had that rationale yet and needs to kind of get ready for that dynamic of a fight? Because I think that's what we're ultimately headed to tonight.
What is best for the people with the less is best for everyone else. You know, if you fight for the rights of the people with disabilities, people who live in poverty, if you get them up, it raises up everyone else. So when you're voting, don't just think, am I okay right now? Think about the people who lives are depending on how elections go. You know, if people with disabilities don't have to worry about what they're going through anymore, that means that everyone else is also really well off. Just vote, not just for yourself, but for the community at large. And participate. You know, there's other ways to make noise, go on strikes, encourage others, realize, like, don't make people feel guilty if they're trapped in certain situations. You know, if you're working 3 jobs and have a family, you're not going to be able to go out and protest.
Right.
Necessarily. So, you know, do what you can when you can.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. Also, everyone check out youtube.com/leftofthebox and your coverage of Canadian politics, your interview with Sam Cedar. Also, I also just went back to memorize and just thinking about things. This is your 2nd anniversary of your channel. Your first anniversary interview was with me.
Yes.
And then your 2nd interview was with Sam Cedar. So who's going to be your 3rd year interview?
I don't know. I wasn't really expecting to land it with Sam Cedar. He's kind of like, he was at the top of people that I wanted to speak to. So it's like,
I think your goal for year 3, which I think the letter hack has talked about making this happen for you, I want to make this happen for you, is a collaboration between like you and the other like bigger like lefty Canadian commentators. Like I want to see you do some stuff with the Serfs, and you do some stuff with Rational National and all that kind of stuff. So that'd be cool.
I'd love to get in touch with them, but it's weird. Even with, you know, the platforms I've had, it's hard breaking through the noise.
Definitely. Believe me, I understand that as well. So
I just joined TikTok to see if that could help.
TikTok's a lot. We don't have even time for that conversation, but it's definitely a lot. But thank you very much, Sandy, for joining. We'll have you on future PowerPoint episodes as well, but I really appreciate you joining this election coverage.
Thank you so much for bringing me on. This has been fun.